So yeah, I've been at odds. Well, first of all, rude. What's up, y'all? It's me, Brianka J. Thank you for coming to my little corner of the internet where we do all things books, all things literature, all things analysis, the whole jazz. Anyway, make sure you smash the subscribe button and comment, like, or whatever. So y'all been doing y'all thing, like pressing that button. Where I figured we should stay on the theme of this video. So this story is called The Man Who Was Almost a Man by Richard Wright. I have never read it, so hopefully it doesn't piss me off. Y'all know how I feel about Richard Wright. Okay, so let's get into it. Dave struck out across the fields, looking homeward through parting light. What's the use talking with them niggas in the field? Anyhow, his mother was putting supper on the table. Them niggas can't understand nothing. One of these days, he was going to get a gun and practice shooting. Then they couldn't talk to him as though he were a little boy. He slowed, looking at the ground. When she gets my pay from old man Hawkins. Oh, sorry. Shucks. I ain't scared of them if they are bigger than me. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go by old Joe's store and get that Sears Roebuck catalog and look at them guns. Maybe Ma will let me buy one when she gets my pay from old man Hawkins. I'm going to beg her to give me some money. I'm old enough to have the gun. I'm 17. Almost a man. He strode, feeling his long, loose, jointed limbs. Shucks. A man ought to have a little gun after he done worked hard all day. He came inside of Joe's store. A yellow lantern glowed on the front porch. He mounted steps and went through the screen door, hearing it bang behind him. There was a strong smell of coal, oil, and mackerel fish. He felt very confident until he saw Fat Joe walk in through the rear door. Then his courage began to ooze. Howdy, Dave. What you want? How you, Mr. Joe? I don't want to buy nothing. I just want to see if you let me look at the catalog a while. Sure, you want to see it here? Nah, so. I want to take it home with me. I'll bring it back tomorrow when I come in from the fields. You planning on buying something? Yes, sir. Your ma letting you have your own money now? Shucks, Mr. Joe. I'm getting to be a man like anybody else. Joe laughed and wiped his greasy white face with a red bandana. What you planning on buying? Dave looked at the floor, scratched his head, scratched his thigh, and smiled. Then he looked up shyly. I'll tell you, Mr. Joe, if you promise you won't tell. I promise. Well, I'm going to buy a gun. A gun? What you want with a gun? I want to keep it. You ain't nothing but a boy. You don't need a gun. Let me have the catalog, Mr. Joe. I'll bring it back. Joe walked through the front door. Dave was elated. He looked around at barrels of sugar and flour. He heard Joe coming back. He craned his neck to see if he were bringing the book. Yeah, he's got it. God dog, he's got it. Here, but be sure you bring it back. It's the only one I got. Show, Mr. Joe. Say, if you want to buy a gun, why don't you buy one for me? I got a gun to sell. Will it shoot? Sure it'll shoot. What kind is it? Oh, it's kinda old. A left hand, wheeler, a pistol, a big one. Is it got bullets in it? It's loaded. Can I see it? Where's your money? What you want it for? I'll let you have it for $2. Just $2? Aw, shucks. Could I buy that when I get my pay? I'll have it here when you want it. Alright, sir. I'll be in for it. He went through the door, hearing it slam again behind him. I'm gonna get some money from mine and buy me a gun. Only $2? He tucked the thick catalog under his arm and hurried. Where you been, boy? His mother held a steaming dish of black-eyed peas. Ah, Ma, just stop down the road. I talk with the boys. You know better to keep supper waiting. He sat down, resting the catalog on the edge of the table. You get up from there and go and get yourself washed. I ain't feeding no hogs in my house. She grabbed his shoulder and pushed him. He stumbled out of the room, came back to the catalog. What's this? Ah, Ma, just a catalog. Who you get it from? From Joe, down at the store. Well, that's good. We could use it in our house. Nah, Ma, he grabbed for her. Give me my catalog, Ma. She held onto it and glared at him. Quit hollering at me. What's wrong with you? You crazy? But Ma, please, it ain't mine. It's Joe's. He told me bring it back tomorrow. She gave up the book. He stumbled back down the back steps, hugging the thick book under his arm. When he had splashed water on his face and hands, he gooped back up to the kitchen and fumbled in the corner for the towel. He bumped into a chair. It clattered to the floor. The catalog sprawled at his feet. When he had dried his eyes, he snatched at the book and held it again under his arm. His mother stood watching him. Now if you're going to act a fool over that old book, I'll take it and burn it up. Nah, Ma, please. Well, sit down and be still. He sat down and drew the oil lamp close. He thumbed after page, unaware of the food his mother set on the table. His father came in, then his small brother. What you got there, Dave? His father asked. Just a catalog, he answered, not looking up. Yeah, here they is. His eyes glowered at the blue-black revolvers. He glanced up, feeling sudden guilt. His father was watching him. He eased the book under the table and rested it on his knees. After the blessing was asked, he ate. He scooped up peas and swallowed fat meat without chewing. Buttermilk helped to wash it down. He did not want to mention money before his father. He would do much better by cornering his mother when she was alone. He looked at his father uneasily out of the edge of his eye. Boy, how come you done quit fiddling with the book and eat your supper? Yes, sir. How you and old man Hawkins getting along? Sir, can't you hear? Why don't you listen? I asked you how was you and old man Hawkins getting along. Oh, swell, Pa. Our Pa's more in there anybody else. Well, you ought to keep your mind on what you're doing. Yes, sir. He poured his plate full of molasses and topped it up with slowly a chunk of cornbread. When his father and brother had left the kitchen, he still sat and looked again at the guns in the catalog, longing to muster courage enough to present his case to his mother. Lord, I only had the pretty one. He could almost feel the slickness of the weapon with his fingers. If he had a big gun like that, he would polish it and keep it shining so it would never rust. Nah, you keep it loaded, by God. Ma, his voice was hesitant. Huh? Old man Hawkins gave you my money yet? Yeah, but ain't no use to you thinking about throwing none of it away. I'ma keep the money so you can have clothes to go to school this winter. He rose and went to her side with the open catalog in his palms. She was washing dishes, her head bent low over a pan. Shyly, he raised the book. When he spoke, his voice was husky, faint. My God knows I want one of these. One of what? She asked, not raising her eyes. One of these, he said again, not daring even to point. She glanced up at the page, then at him with wide eyes. Nicky, is you plumb crazy? Ah, Ma, get out of here. Don't you talk about me about no gun. You a fool. Ma, I can buy one for $2. Not if you know that you ain't. But you promised me one. I don't care what I promised. You ain't nothing but a boy yet. Ma, if you let me buy one, I'll never ask for nothing else no more. I tell you what, get out of here. You ain't got to touch a penny of that money for no gun. That's coming. I had Mr. Hawkins pay your wages to me, 'cause I know you ain't got no sense. But Ma, we need a gun. Pa ain't got no gun. We need a gun in the house. You can never tell what might happen. Now don't you try to make a fool out of me, boy. If you did have a gun, you wouldn't have it. He laid the catalog down and slipped his arm around her waist. Ah, Ma, I done worked harder all summer and ain't asked you for nothing, is I now? That's what you're supposed to do. But Ma, I want a gun. You can let me have $2 out of my money. Please, Ma, I can give it to Pa. Please, Ma, I loves you, Ma. When he spoke, her voice became soft and low. What you want with a gun? You don't need no gun. You'll get in trouble. And if your pa just thought I'll let you have money to buy a gun, he'd have a fit. I'll hide it. It ain't but $2. Lord, child, what's wrong with you? Ain't nothing wrong, Ma. I'm almost a man now. I want a gun. Who gonna sell you a gun? Old Joe at the store. It don't cost but $2. That's all, Ma. Just $2. Please, Ma. She was stacking the plates away. Her hands moved slowly, reflectively. Dave kept in anxious silence. Finally, she turned to him. I'll let you get the gun. You promised me one thing. What's that, Ma? You bring it straight back to me, you hear? It'll be here for Pa. Yes, and let me go now, Ma. She stopped, turned slightly to one side, raised the hem of her dress, rolled down the top of her stocking, and came up with a slender wad of bills. Here, she said, Lord knows you don't need no gun, but your Pa does. You bring it right back to me. You hear? I'm gonna put it up. Now, if you don't, I'm gonna have your Pa lick you so hard you won't forget it. Yes'm. He took the money, ran down the steps and across the yard. Dave! Yeah, Dave! He heard, but he was not going to stop. Now, nah, Lord. The first movement he made the following morning was to reach under his pillow for the gun. In the gray light of dawn, he held it loosely, feeling a sense of power. Could kill a man like this, kill anybody, black or white, and if he were holding his gun in his hand, nobody could run over him. They would have to respect him. It was a big gun with a long barrel with a heavy bent handle. He raised and lowered in his hand, marveling at its weight. He had not come straight home with it as his mother had asked. He had stayed out in the fields, holding the weapon in his hand, aiming it now and then at some imaginary foe. But he had not fired it. He had been afraid that his mother might hear. Also, he was not sure how to fire it. To avoid surrendering the pistol, he had not come into the house until he knew that they were all asleep. When his mother had tiptoed to his bedside late that night and demanded the gun, he had first played possum. Then he had told her that the gun was hidden outdoors, that he would bring it to her in the morning. Now he lay turning it slowly in his hands. He broke it, took out the cartridges, felt them, and then put them back. He slid out of bed and got a long strip of old flannel from her trunk, wrapped the gun in it, and tied it to his naked thigh while it was still loaded. He did not go in to breakfast. Even though it was not yet daylight, he stayed for Jim Hawkins' plantation. Just as the sun was rising, he reached the bams where the mules and plows were kept. Hey, that you, Dave? He turned. Jim Hawkins stood eyeing him suspiciously. What you doing here so early? I don't know. I was getting up so early, Mr. Hawkins. I was fixing to hitch up old Jenny and take her to the fields. Good. Since you're so early, how about plowing that stretch down by the woods? Suits me, Mr. Hawkins. Okay, go to it. He hitched Jenny to a plow and started across the fields. Hot dog. This is just what he wanted. If he could get down by the woods, he could shoot his gun and nobody would hear. He walked behind the plow, hearing the traces creaking, feeling the gun tied to his thigh. When he reached the woods, he plowed 2 whole rows before he decided to take out the gun. Finally, he stopped, looked in all directions, then untied the gun and held it in his hands. He turned it to the mule and smiled. Now what this is, Jenny? Nah, you wouldn't know. You just an old mule. Anyhow, this is a gun and it can shoot. By God. He held the gun at arm's length. What the hell? I'ma shoot this thing. He looked at Jenny again. Listen here, Jenny. When I pull this old trigger, and I want you to act a fool now. Jenny stood with head down, her short ears pricked straight. Dave walked off about 20 feet, held the gun far out from him at arm's length, and then turned his head. Hell, he told himself, I ain't afraid. The gun felt loose in his fingers. He waved it wildly for a moment. Then he shut his eyes and tightened his forefinger. Bloom. A report half deafened him, and he thought his right hand was torn from his arm. He heard Jenny whinnying and galloping over the field, and he found himself on his knees, squeezing his fingers hard between his legs. His hand was numb. He jammed it into his mouth, trying to warm it, trying to stop the pain. The gun lay at his feet. He did not quite know what happened. He stood up and stared at the gun as though it were a living thing. He gritted his teeth and kicked the gun. You almost broke my arm. He turned to look for Jenny. She was far over the field, tossing her head and kicking wildly. Hold on there, old mule. When he caught up with her, she stood trembling, wailing her big white eyes at him. The plow was far away. The traces had broken. Then Dave stopped short, looking, not believing. Jenny was bleeding. Her left side was red and wet with blood. He went closer. Lord of mercy. Wouldn't I shoot this mule? Wonder did I shoot this mule? He grabbed for Jenny's mane. She flinched, snorted, swirled, tossing her head. Hold on now, hold on. Then he saw the hole in Jenny's side, right between the ribs. It was round, wet, red, a crimson streak down the front leg, flowing fast. Good God, I wasn't shooting at the mule. He felt panic. He knew he had to stop that blood, or Jenny would bleed to death. He had never seen so much blood in all his life. He chased the mule for half a mile, trying to catch her. Finally, she stopped, breathing hard, stumpy, tail half arched. He caught her mane and led her back to where the plow and gun lay. Then he stopped, grabbed handfuls of damp black earth, and tried to plug the bullet hole. Jenny shuddered, whinnied, and broke from him. Hold on now. He tried to plug it again, but blood came anyhow. His fingers were hot and sticky. He rubbed the dirt into his palms, trying to dry them. Then again, he attempted to plug the bullet hole. But Jenny shied away, kicking her heels high. He stood helpless. He had to do something. He ran at Jenny. She dodged him. He watched a red stream of blood flow down Jenny's leg and from a bright pool at her feet. Jenny, Jenny, he called weakly. His lips trembled. She's bleeding to death. He looked in the direction of home, wanting to go back, wanting to get help. But he saw the pistol lying in the damp black clay. He had a queer feeling that if he only did something, Jenny would not be there bleeding to death. When he went to her this time, she did not move. She stood with sleepy, dreamy eyes, and when he touched her, she gave a low-pitched whinny and knelt to the ground, her front knees sloping of blood. Jenny, Jenny, he whispered. For a long time she held her neck erect, and then her head sank. Her ribs swelled with a mighty heave, and she went over. Dave's stomach felt empty, very empty. He picked up the gun and held it gingerly between his thumb and forefinger. He hurried at the foot of a tree. He took a stick and tried to cover the pool of blood with dirt. But what was the use? There was Jenny lying with her mouth open, her eyes walled and glassy. He could not tell Jim Hawkins he had shot his mule. But he had to tell something. Yeah. I'll tell him Jenny started getting wheel and fell on the joint of the plow. But that will hardly happen to a mule. He walked across the field slowly, head down. It was sunset. Two of Jim Hawkins' men were over near the edge of the woods, digging a hole in which to bury Jenny. Dave was surrounded by a knot of people, all of whom were looking down at the dead mule. I don't see how in the world it happened, said Jim Hawkins for the 10th time. The crowd parted, and Dave's mother, father, and small brother pushed into the center. Where Dave? His mother called. There he is, said Jim Hawkins. His mother grabbed him. What happened, Dave? What you done? Nothing. Come on, boy, talk, his father said. Dave took a deep breath and he told the story he knew nobody believed. Well, he drawled, I bring old Jenny down here. I could do my plowing. I plowed but about 2 rows, just like you see. He stopped and pointed at the long rows of upturned earth. Then something must have been wrong with old Jenny. She was acting right at all. She started snorting and kicking her heels. I tried to hold her, but she pulled away, ran going. Then when the point of the plow was sticking up in the air, she swung around and twisted herself back at it. She stuck herself in and started to bleed. And before I could do anything, she was dead. Did you ever hear of anything like this in your life? Asked Jim Hawkins. There was white and black standing in the crowd. They murmured. Dave's mother came close to him and looked hard into his face. Tell the truth, Dave, she said. Looks like a bullet hole to me, said one man. Dave, what you do with the gun? His mother asked. The crowd surged in, looking at him. He jammed his hands into his pockets, shook his head slowly from left to right, and backed away. His eyes were wide and painful. Did he have a gun? Asked Jim Hawkins. By God, I told you there was a gun wound, said a man, slapping his thigh. His father caught his shoulder and shook him till his teeth rattled. Tell what happened, you rascal. Tell what... Dave looked at Jenny's stiff legs and began to cry. What'd you do with the gun? His mother asked. What was he doing with a gun? His father asked. Come on and tell the truth, said Hawkins. Ain't nobody gonna hurt you. His mother crowded close to him. Did you shoot the mule, Dave? Dave crowded, seeing blurred white and black faces. I didn't go to shoot her. I swear for God I didn't. I was trying to see if the old gun would shoot. Where you get the gun from? His father asked. I got it from Joe at the store. Where you get the money? Ma gave it to me. He kept worrying me, Bob. I had to. I told him to bring your gun back to me if it was for you, the gun. But how you happened to shoot that mule? Asked Jim Hawkins. I wasn't shooting at the mules, Mr. Hawkins. The gun jumped when I pulled the trigger. And if I know anything, Jenny was there bleeding. Somebody in the crowd laughed. Jim Hawkins walked close to Dave and looked into his face. Well, looks like you have bought you a mule, Dave. I swear for God I didn't go to kill the mule, Mr. Hawkins. But you killed her. All the crowd was laughing now. They stood on tiptoe and poked heads over another's shoulder. Well, boy, looks like you done bought a dead mule. Ain't that a shame? Dave stood down, twisting his feet in the dirt. Well, you needn't worry about it, Bob, said Jim Hawkins to Dave Fathers. Just let the boy keep on working and pay me $2 a month. What you want for the mule, Mr. Hawkins? Jim Hawkins screwed up his eyes. $50. What you do with the gun? Dave's father demanded. Dave said nothing. You want me to take a tree and beat you till you talk? Nah, sir. What you do with it? I throwed it away. Where? I throwed it in the creek. Well, come on home. And first thing in the morning, get to the creek and find the gun. Yes, sir. What you pay for it? $2. Take the gun and get your money back and carry it to Mr. Hawkins, you hear? And don't forget I'm lamb you black bottom good for this. Now march yourself on home, sir. Dave turned and walked slowly. He heard people laughing. Dave glared, his eyes welling with tears. Hot anger bubbled in him. Then he swallowed and stumbled on. That night, Dave did not sleep. He was glad he had got out of killing the mule so easily, but he was hurt. Something hot seemed to turn over inside him each time he remembered how they had laughed. He tossed on his bed, feeling his hard pillow, and Pa says he's gonna beat me. He remembered other beatings, and this, and his back quivered. Nah, I sure don't want him to beat me the way no more. Damn 'em all. Nobody ever gave him anything. All he did was work. They treat me like a mule, and they beat me. He gritted his teeth, and Ma had to tell on me. Well, if he had to, he would take old man Hawkins that $2, but that meant selling the gun, and he wanted to keep that gun. $50 for a dead mule. He turned over, thinking how he had fired the gun. He hadn't itched to fire it again. If other men can shoot a gun, by God, I can. He was still listening. Maybe they all sleeping now. The house was still. He heard the soft breathing of his brother. Yes, now. He would go down and get that gun and see if he could fire it. He eased out of bed and slipped into overalls. The moon was bright. He ran almost all the way to the edge of the woods. He stumbled over the ground, looking for the spot where he had buried the gun. Yeah, here it is. Like a hungry dog stretching for a bone, he pawed it up. He puffed his black cheeks and blew dirt from the trigger and barrel. He broke it and found 4 cartridges unshot. He looked around. The fields were filled with silence and moonlight. He clutched in the gun, stiff and hard in his fingers. But as soon as he wanted to pull the trigger, he shut his eyes and turned his head. Nah, I can't shoot with my eyes closed and my head turned. With effort, he held his eyes open. Then he squeezed. Bloom. He was stiff, not breathing. The gun was still in his hands. Damn it, he had done it. He had fired again. Boom. He smiled. Boom. Boom. Click. Click. There. It was empty. If anybody could shoot a gun, he could. So he put the gun into his hip pocket and started across the fields. When he reached the top of the ridge, he stood straight and pounded in the moonlight, looking at Jim Hawkins' big white house, feeling the sun sagging in his pocket. Law, if I just had one more bullet, I'd take a shot at that house. I'd like to scare old Hawkins just a little bit. Just enough to let him know Dave Saunders is a man. To his left, the road curved, running to the tracks of the Illinois Central. He jerked his head, listening. Far off came a faint. He stood rigid. $2 a month. Let's see now. This means it'll take about 2 years. Shucks. I'll be damned. He started down the road toward the tracks. Yeah, here she comes. He stood beside the track and held himself stiffly. Here she comes. Around the bend. Come on, yeah, you slowpoke. Come on. He had his hand on his gun. Something quivered in his stomach. Then the train thundered past, the gray and brown boxcars rumbling and clicking. He gripped the gun tightly. Then he jerked his hand out of his pocket. I bet you Bill wouldn't do it. I bet you. The car slid past, steel grounding upon steel. I'm riding you tonight, so help me God. He was hot all over. He hesitated just a moment. Then he pulled the top of a car and lay flat. He felt his pockets. The gun was still there. Ahead, the long words were glistening in the moonlight, stretching away to somewhere where he could be a man.